Hey guys, Chris Burke here, Welcome Home Realty. I'm here with Brian Lee, appraiser, teacher, and has his real estate license, pretty much does it all. Brian, introduce yourself.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for having me out today.
Yeah.
My name is Brian Lee. I'm an appraiser. Like I say, reiterate everything you said. Been in the industry for about 25 years. Primarily work with residential properties, but I've dealt with some commercial and all that. I actually enjoy commercial. I like numbers. I'm one of those math geeks that likes to do that kind of thing. So it makes me the talk of the town, but not in a good way, because nobody likes math.
All right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I'm definitely not a math guy.
Yeah. So you kind of have to be a math guy to be an appraiser almost. It's important to understand the statistics and the modeling and the trends, and spreadsheets are our life.
Yeah, not for me.
Yeah.
So what else have you done? Like, what led you into appraisals? What's your background? A little bit of history.
Yeah, what got me into it is that my dad's in construction, so that kind of got me interested in housing. I used to work with my hands a lot, and it got worn out, got tired of hurting my knees hurting and my hands hurting, and working in the cold and working in the heat. I got too pretentious or buff, or what is that? What is the word? Biffy. I got I got tired of that kind of work, and I have mad respect for the people that do that, but knew that my brain had a little bit more of a ability to take on mathematical things, and met with a high school buddy of mine, and we decided to take off and started appraising. So that's
Awesome.
kind of what we got into it.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I have a background in construction, so we're kind of in the same field.
Yeah.
I'm not smart as you, so I'm selling houses. But
It's one of the things I like to tell people is that I don't know that it's necessarily that I'm smart. It's just I've been around for so long that you just know a lot of stuff.
Right.
So I'm not smart. I just
just older.
I'm just
right?
older, and just by that fact, I just have more that got put into my brain.
For sure. All right, well, I've got a list of questions here for you,
Yeah.
so we'll get right into it
Absolutely.
and go from there. What is an appraisal?
The textbook definition is a credible opinion of value. That's the most succinct answer to the question. However, an appraisal is a lot more because it involves a lot of thought process. It starts off with figuring out what's the purpose of the appraisal. So, for example, most of the work that you see most appraisers work on, and what most agents see, what homeowners see, are typically for lenders. So the lenders, and understanding that process, there's a way that we go about doing things, the way we look at properties, the way we handle our research and our background. Also specific forms that we have to use that governmental agencies require us to do. Comparing that to something of like maybe a probate appraisal, somebody that has somebody that passed away, they're going in as part of an estate. We go about that a different way. Or if it's a tax appeal, there's all different kinds of things. So the appraisal process does need to start with an understanding of what exactly it is that you want. Again, because it would change the parameters to some degree. So we look at that, and then from there it's just an analysis of data. So we would look at a property, look at the data of a market, and get into all of that stuff and figure out how it relates to this property, and specifically to the problem that you're trying to ask us to solve. And then writing a report that's understandable and cohesive and makes sense, and it's also believable, because that's one of the big challenges, especially in the lending side of things, is that it's tough to make a credible appraisal, a believable appraisal in a market that's been increasing so rapidly. We know what some sold for 6 months ago, and so I've got data from 6 months ago, but trying to predict, is that trend going to continue on? So if I think that it is, I've got to provide some data that shows that, yeah, 6 months ago it sold for X, now today it's sold for X plus something.
Right.
So that's a lot goes into that report writing. So that's the general process.
Okay. What are the qualifications for appraisers?
Well, to be licensed, you'd have to first start off. You have to have a 4-year degree from college. So that was a pretty big change, because up until it's probably been 5 or 6 years ago, you didn't have to have any college degree at all. So some would state that that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that is a requirement now, that you have to have a 4-year college degree, preferably toward business, finance, accounting, something like that, stuff like that. Once you've gotten to there, then you take a 90-hour kind of a pre-licensing course, in a way is what they call it, teaching you some of the very basic core principles of appraisal. And then after that, you take an examination to prove that you have some competency for what you've learned in those classes. Once you've passed that, then you get to go work for somebody. So you align yourself with a supervisor, and that supervisor watches over you for a period of 2 years, or a minimum of 2 years. And during that 2-year time period, you go out with them on properties, look at the various analysis, work through different situations and all that. And after you've accrued so many hours of practice, you complete another 210 hours of education, take a second exam, show that you've completed all that, done that successfully, and then you become an appraiser.
So on when you're doing like your, let's call it an apprenticeship, interning essentially, are you doing the work, or are you following them around, or is it a mixed bag, like you do a little bit and they do, you follow them for the initial and then you start working?
Yeah. I have a trainee, so this is kind of how I work it. I'm sure other appraisers might work it a little bit differently, but usually on the front end, the supervisor, somebody like me, would take over most of the work, because you've got somebody that's just coming into the industry, so they're green as can be and still learning things. So they're doing work, they're involved in it, but they're screwing up a lot, and understandably so. So the supervisor takes on a lot of that work and watches over what they do and helps guide them. Let the trainee kind of watch over their shoulder, if you will. And then over time, after, and everybody's different. Some people might take 6 months, some people might take a year, some people might learn it in 8 months. But once you've got the basics down, I mean, there's still plenty to learn, but once you have the core principles, the basics down, then it kind of shifts. So that way the supervisor's kind of watching over the shoulder of the trainee, where the trainee's doing more of the work, the supervisor standing back, watching them, watching over their shoulder to make sure they're doing okay. So it's usually probably a shift of that. Again, that's probably what I guess most people do.
Yeah, I assume it's based on trust.
It is, and obviously performance too, because like I say, it's unfortunately there's not even any set way of training somebody. It's, we have this assignment today and it's for this particular property, and tomorrow it's going to be something completely different. So there's different ways we would tackle different properties. A 3-bedroom 2-bath ranch home in the middle of suburbia has a completely different outlook than looking at a 5,000 square foot home on 20 acres out in rural America. So just two completely different paths that you'd go down. I mean, there's some basic things that you'd stick with, but still there's going from there. So you really have to kind of gauge their ability on those different property types too. So.
Is there a certain method every appraiser uses, or do you all kind of do it your own way?
Yeah, it's probably a mix of both of those. So again, looking at the lending side of things, the lender with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac underwriting guidelines and all that, we are all subject to the same set of rules and set of requirements. So to that end, we're writing something very similar, but there are processes that are different. I mean, shoot, you could even get into the element of even inspecting a property. I mean, for me, what I do, I'll go out to a property, I've got a tablet device, an iPad, and I use a digital laser measurer, and I take notes on the iPad and all that. Some appraisers still use a clipboard and a piece of paper and a tape measure. So not to say that my way is right or wrong compared to theirs, but just you have that difference there on how you process it, and accuracy sometimes too. And then the analysis, kind of the same thing. Again, there's general processes, general ways that we work into things. Pulling data and trying to guesstimate markets and stuff like that. But I mean, even my trainee that works for me, him and I will have discussions on how I came up with something different than him. And the end result is usually pretty close, but still just, the first and second steps are probably different, for one reason or another. But at the end of the day, are we still coming up with something similar? And that's really the most important thing.
Right.
So yeah.
End result is
it is. So there is a date process. I mean, I would say there is. I mean, I could probably come up with a dozen steps that every appraiser would do, but maybe I do 6 first and they do 1 first, or vice versa, something like that. And even 6 inside of that step 6, I might do it a little differently than somebody else does. But once you put it all together, do we come to some reasonable, credible opinion? And that's where you'll find that hopefully we've both done the same job.
So there's no set of standards that you use or anything like that?
Well, to that end, there are. Again, they're just being an appraiser, we are guided by what's called USPAP, the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. So say that like 10 times fast. So that's kind of our Bible, if you will, that's created by a governmental agency that watches over the generalities of appraisal, no matter what kind of appraisal it is. If it's for a loan or for a lender or a private citizen, if it's a commercial or residential report, whatever, it doesn't matter. This USPAP set of guidelines rules everything that we do with regard to the general appraisal process. So we'll always have that. That's always there under all circumstances. And then from there, again, it depends on, again, the client to some degree. The lender will have their own set of rules, the guidelines that Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, or maybe even they impose. Or it could even be a situation where a private citizen, again, dealing with a probate or an estate type of an appraisal, they'll have some rules for us. For example, we'll do an appraisal for somebody that passed away maybe a year ago. So in that case, under most circumstances for an appraisal, I'm going to write the appraisal based upon today's data. But in some estate situations, they want the appraisal from what the data was a year ago. So that's kind of their own set of instructions, is that, Brian, you could look at today, but we don't need the information from today. We want it from a year ago because that's when the person passed and there's a tax situation or, whatever. So they might even impose some rules on how they, what they're looking for.
So it really is a case by case.
It is, but again, overall, USPAP is going to control all of that. So regardless of the situation, it's going to set that up. And certainly if it's a lender appraisal, it's still going to be the same. And you can get even into the microfine of this, where if it's an FHA or VA loan, that changes things up a little bit too, even on the lender side of things, because then you add additional layers of scrutiny, I guess, if you will. So, but yeah, it is, in some ways it is different from case to case, but in some cases there are some very general rules that apply no matter what.
Who hires you as an appraiser, and when would that happen?
Yeah, again, it gets back to that purpose. I mean, I personally get hired for all kinds of stuff, or assignments rather. So from the largest percentage of appraisers, I would guess most of them are lender driven. So they're going to be contacted by a lender. That you have a typical buyer that's buying a home and they don't have the cash to do so, so they'll get a loan. And when that lender processes that loan, they're going to want an appraisal done on the property that the buyer is purchasing to verify that it has that value. That they're purchasing it for 100. They want to make sure that the home is at least, or I say the lender wants to make sure that it's worth at least $100,000. So that's probably most of the time where you'll see that. But certainly with my business, I get called in for all different kinds of things. Again, estate, probate, we deal with that very often. We do listing appraisals. Sometimes, again, to all credit to all real estate agents, there are just some complex properties out there that even the best real estate agent might struggle with trying to price. So we do, half a dozen to a dozen listing appraisals a month, just helping out on those special properties, or maybe even a buyer or rather a seller that is questioning the agent, that the agent knows they did a great job on their CMA, but the seller's just convinced that the agent's wrong. So the agent will have an appraiser maybe come in and say, hey, help me out here, or show me, right, that maybe I screwed up as the agent. So there's that. There's tax appeal that we've gotten calls for. I've done some courtroom stuff, both with divorce and other things where maybe there was an issue with regarding a defect in a property, that maybe there was something that was undisclosed on a foundation, for example. And so we have parties that are disputing that, and they'll have an appraisal done to say, okay, with this defect, it's worth this, and if it were repaired, it's worth this. So that's a lot of what we get into.
Is there anything that people need to look for in an appraiser if I'm hiring one?
Yeah, they just need to call me, Brian Lee.
Yeah.
No. Unfortunately, there's not a good answer to this. Certainly you want somebody with experience, but also you want somebody that has what we call geographic competency, because there are appraisers that come in from other parts of the state. And to their credit, I'm sure they know their craft very well. They're great appraisers, but maybe they've never visited Indianapolis or Plainfield or Franklin or anything like that. So they're just not familiar with the market at all. So it's not that they're a good or bad appraiser. They may know their processes very well, but are they familiar with this specific market? So I'd want to look for that. Certainly property type. Again, I'm not trying to toot my horn, but I've been around for 25 years, so I've seen a lot of properties. Compare that to an appraiser that's been around for 5 years. They've seen plenty, and they have great experience, and again, good knowledge. I don't want to diminish what they have, but a $2 million property, like I looked at the other day, would probably be daunting to them. Again, they have the qualifications for it. They may have the license for it, but how many of those have they done? And so something like that, I probably want to shy away from somebody like that, that doesn't have that experience. So outside of that, there's some people give credibility, a lot of credibility to designations. That's something in the appraisal industry that we get into. Most of the time, again, I don't know if that necessarily means anything. Again, I might be biased a little bit. I don't have any designation, but having said that, I do some review work on other appraisers to make sure that the other appraiser did a good job. And I've seen people that have designations and experience and knowledge and all that missed stuff. So I mean, the designations are nice, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have a GRI or an MAI rather, I should say, that makes you better. In some ways it probably does, I'll be honest, but in a lot of ways it probably doesn't.
So let's say I do a lot of stuff down south, like Nashville area. Let's say I have a log cabin, not real typical for really anywhere else but that area. Is there a way to seek out an appraiser that knows their stuff on log cabins? I mean, what should I be asking?
Unfortunately, there's not, because there's no database of anything like that. It's really just asking the appraiser to say, hey, I've got this really unique property. I've got a log cabin in Nashville, Indiana, and it's kind of a unique thing. Do you have any experience with log cabins? Do you have any experience in Nashville? And if they say, yeah, I work down there all the time, yeah, I've done several, I've done 10, 20, 30 log cabin homes, that's going to make me feel good about that to some degree. If somebody says, yeah, I get down to Brown County once or twice a year, or I remember doing a log cabin a couple of years ago, then that would be something I would want to shy away from. But you're also taking the appraiser's word for it. It's possible, even though not hopefully not something you'll see, but you might ask an appraiser. I've got this home down in Nashville. It's this log cabin home. They say, oh yeah. I've done plenty of those. I've done all of it, and it's not because they do. They want the work. They want the money. They want the income, and that would be the exception. I would say 99% of appraisers would not ever do that, but certainly I wouldn't want to ignore that either. I wouldn't want to just forget that could happen, because I know that it has.
Right. When would be the times for just an owner to get an appraisal? Is there ever a time where you feel like that's something that should be done, whether it's listing your house or before you talk to agents? Or, I mean, I know you said your guys' value and our value from an agent standpoint varies sometimes.
Yeah.
So is it smart to get an appraisal up front, or is it something that I don't really need?
Yeah, and that's really going to depend on a lot of things. Again, what is the appraisal used for? But also, just some people's personality and their comfort level. So talking about it just on the real estate side, I'd say honestly, as much as I want people to hire me to do an appraisal, and I'd love to do appraisals all day long for people, that there are good agents out there that can do the job that we do. From the standpoint of coming up with a number for a listing or a purchase price. So, I mean, appraisers are not that we're expensive, but agents do a CMA for free. Where if you hire an appraisal, there is a cost associated with that. So to that end, it might make sense to get to with an agent. But again, if you have a very unique property, it might be beneficial to hire an appraiser. That way you have that level of experience and that level of background and all that, because that's all we do is pricing property. We're an agent, they price property, but they have a lot of other things they're working on as well. So in that case, it might be smart to get there. or even in a situation where they had an agent come out and they like the agent a lot, but they're just the person doesn't agree with the agent's number. So again, maybe hire an appraiser to do that. Talking about clients as well, we do a lot of appraisals for buyers, where the buyer has made an offer on a property that's been listed through another agent or whatever, and they hire us. Let me back up a minute. That buyer's paying cash. To be clear, they're paying cash. So when they're paying cash, they're not going to get that lender appraisal that they would normally get if they were getting the loan. Since they're paying cash, they would hire me or somebody like me to do an appraisal for them, just to verify that the offer that we made is a reasonable offer, that we're going to hit there. So those would be examples on the realty side, and then like say for estate purposes, divorce. We do a lot of divorce appraisals where obviously husband or spouses are separating from each other and they're trying to figure out the value of this. Tax appeal, private sales, things like that. Private sales are another big one where mom's selling it to their son or their daughter, and they just want to come up with a price. So a lot of application there.
Cool. What's the main difference between an independent appraisal and appraisal attached to a purchase?
Probably the biggest thing is the regulation, and by that what I mean is lending processes or lending underwriting. So as far as the appraisal process itself, it's all the same, because again, in both cases I'm still looking at data. I'm looking at the same set of data. It's not that I'm looking for this set of data if it's a non-lender versus this set of data if it is a lender. I'm looking at all the relevant information that ties into that property. So none of that really changes. The processes don't change. So really it's just the underwriting requirements that go into it. So forms would be different. The lender, a Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac backed loan, they have specific documents, specific forms, specific language even that they want us to use in an appraisal report, where with an independent or non-lender appraisal, I have some flexibility on form type, on the language that we use, the things we include. We should come up with the same number. At the end of the day, I crunch all the data and it's still the same number for either one, but just the generalities of how we would write it up. And then also there's a lot more scrutiny on the lending side, because it's again, for lenders, they're selling these appraisal reports, or I'm sorry, not appraisal reports, they're selling the loans that are attached to these appraisal reports to secondary mortgage market participants like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And when they do that, they have a high they have a high standard. So the lender wants to make sure that the appraisal meets all their criteria, so that way that secondary market buyer will purchase this loan. So if it doesn't meet that, then the appraisal does nothing for them, the loan does nothing for them, and the lender's stuck with it, which is what they don't want to do.
What information do appraisers gather or get when doing an appraisal?
So we lump it into two categories. It's what they call specific data and general data. General data are going to be all the things that have an outside influence on this property itself. So we're looking at market area. That might include like a school district, like Center Grove or a Franklin or a Whiteland, something like that. We're also looking to see, what's the general locale of the property? Is it a suburban area? Is it urban? Is it rural? Those will change some things. How close is shopping and schools and entertainment sources, recreation, groceries, things like that. So those are going to be all those outside things that we're looking for. We're also looking at the general market trends. That regardless, we have homes that are similar to each other. What's the general market doing? Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? What's being affected? So that's what we call the general data that we're going to do all that research for. And then we look at specific data. So to that end, that's data about the property. So we're looking at square footage, bedroom counts, bathroom counts, quality of finishes, updates, upgrades to some degree. Maybe you have a brand new home and it's all new stuff, but you put in the laminate flooring instead of the carpet, or you put the cheap laminate flooring instead of really nice hardwood flooring, stuff like that. So we should be looking at all that stuff. What we don't look for is to recognize that we're not home inspectors, and that's something that a lot of people, or I shouldn't say a lot, but several people don't recognize is that I'm not getting up in the attic. I'm certainly not digging through it. I'm not digging through the crawl space. I'm not testing furnaces and all that. There are two types of loans, FHA, VA, that has some element of an inspection in there, but still for the most part we aren't inspecting those things. So we might look at a home that on the surface looks great, and to us, from what we've looked at, the home is just fine, but maybe there's mold in the attic, or there's a foundation issue, something like that we would have no idea of. And certainly those things are going to affect the value, but unless we're aware of it, we wouldn't know that. So there is a lot of data points that we pull in, but some of them we just don't do, and we're not qualified. Again, even just looking at a furnace, I can walk past a furnace and things are rusty and making all kinds of noises and all that. I'm going to say there's probably a problem there. I mean, anybody is probably going to see that. But hey, I put my hand up to the vent. It's spitting out some hot air, cold air. I mean, that's about the extent that I'm going to do for a test. I'm not pulling off the panels and all that and going into it from that standpoint. So
okay, so this is a topic that rubs a lot of people the wrong way, so we'll just cross that.
Appraisal just rubs people the wrong way.
Yeah, that's a true story. That is a true story. So, when you do an appraisal for a lender, do you receive a copy of the purchase agreement?
We do, and there's two reasons for that. First of all, it's required. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac underwriting guidelines require that we get it because, and the purpose for that is that we are supposed to analyze that sale. What's misunderstood is that we are looking at the purchase price because that's the number we want to hit, and that's not the purpose. To that end, I wouldn't say that some appraisers don't think that, but that's not the intent behind the rule. The rule is that we want to know that this buyer and seller act in their own best interest, that there wasn't some unusual circumstance. I mean, from one example where it's, the mother and father selling it to their son, and they're giving him a heck of a deal because they love him, and they're selling it for $20,000 under value. So the home's worth $100, but they're selling it for $80. So the purchase price is $80. I'd want to know, well, does that mean that the market value is 80, or it's actually 100 and they're getting a deal because it's their family? On the other side, maybe it's a buyer that's extremely motivated, they don't have any money, and so they're willing to offer over list price because they need concessions, they need other stuff. So instead of 100, we're willing to offer you 110. I want to know that buyer's motivated, that they ask for conditions and concessions and all that stuff, because that would indicate that they probably paid more, that they were motivated to offer a higher than what I call market value price for that property. So that's why we go through that. And then the other thing too is that the way that I handle an appraisal report with the purchase like that is that I write my report. I pull my data and look at all that. I don't even look at the purchase price yet. I just want to have an idea, unbiased, where do I think I'm going to fall? And then I look at the purchase price to say, okay, well, I was close, or gosh, I'm off here. Why is that? And then that's where the first answer comes back in, is that I'm off, because it was the mother and father situation, or I'm off because this buyer is just really desperate, right. Or I screwed up. Maybe I missed something sometime. As much as I like to tease my wife, I don't screw up. I don't make any mistakes. Yeah. I mean, on occasion I do. So I use that too sometimes to say, oh my gosh, I'm off here. Did I miss something? Did I see something? And it makes me kind of re-look at my data and say, okay, no, I feel pretty strongly. Maybe I don't have an answer for the resolution to why there's the difference, but it gives me pause. It gives me the chance to say, okay, I'm going to double check myself just to make sure.
So on that answer, you said like concessions. Let's say the purchase price is $100,000, or the list price is $100,000. You go through, run all your numbers. You get 100, 1 to 105. The seller is giving $5,000 in concessions. Does that weigh into that final number factor for you? And how do you determine if you got, let's say, 95 to 100, and they're giving them five extra in concessions? How does that factor into your decision making?
Well, this is where people get mad. It makes a lot of people mad. It makes a lot of agents mad, and this is just the fact. In most cases, is that when we're looking at something of a purchase price and it has concessions, using your example that the home, I think you said it was listed at 100. The buyer offered 105, but asked for $5,000 in concessions. So what we're looking at there is what we talk in appraisal world is cash equivalency. What we're saying is that, in effect, to the seller, on the seller's side of this, what did they get out of that sale? they did not get 105. They got 105 offer price, and they accepted 105, but they're paying $5,000 of concessions. So just on that one element alone, they really only just got a $100,000 offer, right. And then the $5,000 was added to make up for that difference. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at that $5,000 and say, well, really that seller, put it a different way, buyer one comes on and does exactly that. I offer him 105 and ask for $5,000 in concessions. Buyer two comes along and says, I don't need concessions. Is that seller going to sell that home to them for $100,000? And I'd say yes, they would. They'd sell it for 100. I mean, of course, they'd love the 105. I won't say that they won't, but if they get 100 from buyer A, or 105 from buyer A, or they get 100 without concessions from buyer B, it's the same offer. All else the same. Exactly. So that's where that answer comes into. But certainly there are situations where there's concessions involved in all that, and they would be part of the transaction. So I wouldn't always back it out, but just most of the time we do, and it's for that reason.
What if there's 25 offers on the second day and one person's willing to pay 20 grand over price? Does that affect anything? I mean, is there any value given to this market's crazy? Like you said, you have to look at the market data. If this market's crazy and I can get 25 offers and somebody's willing to pay that, and then the appraiser comes in and says, no, it's worth this, really, in real life, it's worth this. There seems to be a miss. That's where agents get mad. That's
Yep.
where everybody gets mad.
Yep.
Is there a way to combat that? I mean, what's your opinion on it?
That's a conversation I can get in the weeds with. So I did get into the discussions with agents about that. There's a lot of thoughts. So to answer the question, your reasoning is not wrong. And to that end, it's certainly something I'm going to pay attention to. Every situation, just right out of the gate, I am going to look at that. I'm going to pay attention to that. I'm going to hopefully have the agent tell me, Brian, we received 25 offers. We had this just incredible activity, and here's a representation of that. I will take that into account. But also too, you might have 25 offers, but all of them are at or near purchase price, or I keep saying purchase price, list price, and you have the one that's $20,000 over. I mean, in my real estate office, we've had that, where people, we have a property listed for 150, and we'll get 155, 156, and we'll have several offers there. We have somebody that offers 165. That was kind of an outlier. Right. So certainly, does that mean that the home is worth 165? I don't think so. But maybe it's worth 155, and I can see that, and I can justify that. I can reason through that. Another side of that, though, is that you had the seller and the listing agent that did their analysis and felt comfortable with the list price, that if the home was really worth what you sold it for, why wasn't it listed there to begin with? And it was for the same reason why we're valuing it where we value it, is that when you listed it, you did your CMA, you looked at your history, you looked at all the stuff like we're going to look at, and you put it at your number. And you had these buyers that came in, they've gotten this feeding frenzy and acted fools sometimes, and built up the price to this high ridiculous number, not because they're offering a market value price, but just they get tired of negotiating and tired of losing deals. So I know the home's only worth 100, but I'm going to pay 110 because I just want to get a home right now. Those are the things we try to watch for. So it is a tough situation. So again, a good appraiser would take that into account, that I'm still going to want to look at that thing, and that's where an agent can step up and help out with that. In fact, I teach a class to agents on that particular subject, or including that subject, where I suggest that they put on a spreadsheet or something like that, or a Word document as far as that's concerned, where you kind of line out that we received 5 offers, and offer 1 was the general numbers, of course. So here's the purchase price, concessions, etc. And so that way I can see, hey, there's a trend here, that you had it listed for 100 or 150, but you had 6 offers at around 155. I can believe that. I can see that. You've given me some data. Or you don't give that to me at all, and you say it's worth 165 even though I had it listed at 150. That's where it gets to be tough for us, and for you guys too.
So is there anything that you would suggest an agent does or doesn't do that's going to help or hurt, your process? Can I, as an agent, just sitting in from the outside, is it smart for me to leave comps? Is it smart for me to leave that kind of data for you, even though I know you're going to pull your own comps, it doesn't matter what I put out, really. You're going to do your own due diligence. But is it going to help you, or does it just make me as an agent look like I'm trying to prove my price?
To some appraisers, I think it would be that just being in the industry and talking to some appraisers and incorrectly, mind you, I think they think this is that you're trying to influence them. You're trying to say that the appraiser doesn't know how to do their job, and that you're giving this to me because you don't know how to do your job, Mr. Appraiser. And I'm sure there's some agents that are out there that think that, and to that end, I don't care. For me, when I get that information, I'm happy to take it on, and I think most appraisers are, is that they're willing to take that information. However, to answer your original question, is that that's usually not the best thing to give the appraiser, because as you indicate, we're doing our due diligence, we're looking at our own database, we're looking at our own things, which are the same things as yours, so it's very unlikely that we're going to find something different, that I'm going to look for homes like mine, or like this one, just like you look for comparables like this one. So usually comps aren't the best thing. It's the other things that aren't as apparent, like updates to a property, things like that. Some of the best information I've received from agents aren't even about the property themselves. I had a property, I don't know, 6 months ago or something like that, where a comp next door, or rather a home next door, had sold almost identical to the subject property that I was valuing, and it sold for about $10,000, $15,000 less than the subject property. And I'm thinking, why is there such a discrepancy here? And I mean, I'm looking at this thing, there's no reason that this home should have sold for as high as it did. But fortunately, the agent called me up and said, hey, the home next door wanted to let you know that it was actually part of a divorce situation, that one of the spouses destroyed the interior of the home, and it sold for well below market value because of that motivational issue that was going on with that property. So at that point, then it became very clear, okay, that's why that happened. And that's not in the listing sheet. The listing sheet doesn't say husband and wife were fighting and hated each other and put holes in the wall and destroyed, cabinets and stuff like that. So I mean, stuff like that. So that's some of the best information.
What are benefits of getting an appraisal?
The expertise. And then again, I say that because I'm a real estate agent. I've got real estate agents that work for me even. I had a lot of my friends are real estate agents, but to all their credit, they don't have the background, most likely, that most appraisers do. And that's a general statement. There's obviously plenty of good agents out there that could do just as good of a job as me or any other appraiser that's out there. So most of the time, it's one of those situations that we need to recognize a couple of things. First of all is that, again, like I mentioned earlier, is that all I do is appraisals. That's all that I work on. That's my sole job. So doing being that that's the only thing I do day in and day out, I have a lot more familiarity. I mean, I might look at 400 or 500 homes in a year, where an agent might look at maybe 100 homes in a year, maybe list 50 of them, stuff like that. So they obviously have a lot of experience and a lot of background, but they just don't have the concentration of properties that I've seen. And to that end too, the educational side is quite a bit different for an appraiser. A real estate agent goes through 90 hours of class work and takes one exam, and they're off to the races and selling real estate. And for the appraiser, we go through 300 hours of education and two years of experience, and we have to go through two state exams. So again, that's not to say that we're smarter, but we do have a lot more education on one specific topic, and that is the valuation of property, where an agent wouldn't have that. So there is a little bit of credibility. There is a little bit more analysis that we're taught and trained to do, where most of the people don't. Again, it's not that they can't or that there aren't some people that do, but generally speaking, the appraiser has that specialty. If I were to do an analogy, maybe you could, if you have a heart condition, you could go to a general practitioner, a family doctor, and they'd probably be able to diagnose most situations. But if you have a unique situation or whatever, you want a heart specialist. So kind of in a way, where maybe the agent was the general practitioner, the family practitioner. They certainly help you and give you some good advice and all that, but that you might want the expert, the one that specializes in only that one thing. So that would be probably the best way to think about it from that standpoint.
Will every appraiser get the same number, or generally around the same amount?
It depends on how you define that. It's a great question, because I get asked that all the time. And kind of one of the first questions you asked me is what an appraisal? What is an appraisal? And the definition is an opinion of value. So it's my opinion of value, but there are other appraisers out there that are doing the same job that I am, looking at probably the same data set, but they might have a slightly different opinion of value. So we should be all in the same ballpark. To say that we all have the same number would be just incorrect. There's not going to ever be that thing. So you might have 100 appraisers that look at the same property, and most of us think it's worth 100, but a couple think it's worth 98, some think it's worth 102 or 103, and we're all in that same stretch. If you have one person that thinks it's 120 and one person thinking that it's 80, there's a problem there. But having said that, like that $2 million home I looked on Monday, I would bet that another appraiser that I would be hard stretched to see if they came up with the 2.4 that the owner thought, but still, they might have come up with 1.8, 1.9, which is a significant difference. I mean, we're talking $100,000, $200,000, but that is actually somewhat reasonable given the ambiguity of that property type. So we should all be in the same range, but to say that there is a specific number that all of us would hit, that would be just by a fluke. I mean, with rare exceptions, of course, but it would just not be common at all.
Right. So usually you're looking for a range that everybody's going to be within.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things that that many appraisers and even agents, as far as that's concerned, have talked about, is that because evaluation is not a science, because it's not a specific formula, or you plug these numbers in and it just spits out here's the number. There is a range. Even when I write a report, I'll look at something and say, well, it's somewhere between 102 and 108. Does that make it 105? Well, why isn't it 102? Why isn't it 108 or 106 or 104? I have to pick a number, but isn't 102 and 108, isn't that, I shouldn't say a more accurate representation, that the one number is an accurate number, but gosh, it's so non-specific that it seems that it's more reasonable to give a tight range. I'm not saying your home's worth somewhere between 100 and 200. Good luck.
Yeah.
but still, I mean, it's because we can't come up with the number. It's not reasonable. I shouldn't say it's not reasonable. It's just knowing that you're not going to get the same number from every person, that a range is probably more reasonable. And you probably find that appraisers are going to have a similar range. That's actually where, if I were to guess, you'd find more conformity, is that we have the same range. I knew you're between 100 and 110, instead of everybody thought was 105 or 106 or whatever. So
Right. Is there any specific areas within a home that you would say would add value if I upgrade, let's say the kitchen, for instance? Is that going to add value more than doing the bathroom? Is there areas I need to focus on if I'm going to do renovations, let's say?
yeah, and you hit the two, is that kitchens and bathrooms are almost always the top things that people look for. So those are the things that you're most likely going to get the more bang for your buck. Having said that, though, if you have an older home, a home built in the 1940s or 50s, and you have windows that are just shot, that are barely operable, that the wood and it's all deteriorated, the paint's worn off of it and all that, that stands out a lot to somebody, and from an energy savings and a lot of different factors. So for the cost that it would take to replace those windows, it might be beneficial to replace those. Same thing with flooring. If you have carpeting and that's been just absolutely worn out and it looks just atrocious, holes in it, and they bunch together and all that, it'd probably be beneficial to replace it. And so to that end, then some of those things, it's not necessarily that it adds more value, it's that it makes it at least worth what the home is worth, if that makes sense. So using the carpet as an example, most of the time I would say carpet's not going to add any value at all. Replace it and it looks great and it makes the home look fresh and clean and all that, but it doesn't add any value. But if the carpet that was in there is all matted and torn up and stained and all that, if that home was worth 100 with good carpet, that means your home is probably worth 92, 93, whatever, something. So putting in brand new carpet will bring it back up to 100. So by that default, it did increase the value. It didn't take it more than 100. It didn't take it above market value or what it would have normally sold for. It just brought up to what it
would. So in that instance, let's say we have carpet, it's a fairly new house. If I take the carpet out and put a hardwood, is that going to add value to that 100, or am I still at 100 even though I put hardwood?
Yeah, generally speaking, I'd say it probably would. An upgrade like that's going to add a little bit, but then again, you look at the cost difference. So, and I'm totally making up a number, but just to kind of look at it from an illustrative perspective. Yeah, maybe you could put in hardwoods for $5,000, and so yeah, you'll get a little bit of a bump from the 100,000, but it'll only be maybe 101, 102, 103, something like that. So you put $5,000 in it to put those hardwoods in, but you only got 1,000 or 2,000 back out of it. So was it worth it? Probably not. Again, economically speaking, it wasn't, but certainly from a marketing standpoint. It might have been worth it, and certainly, I mean, some people have dogs. It's a great example.
Right.
It makes a lot of sense to have hardwoods in that home. So I didn't put the hardwoods in because I was trying to get more value, but that I'm tired of the dogs tearing up my carpet, and the hardwoods are easy to maintain, so it might make sense for them to do it that way. So.
Okay, so is there any areas where I would get the same economic value that I put in? Say I put 10,000 in a kitchen, am I going to get similar returns, or am I just putting it in for my use?
Again, one of the complaints about appraisals is that we're never definitive. We never say this is the number.
Right.
And to that end, the answer is no. There's not. And just historically speaking, there's almost nothing that you can do to a home that's going to increase its value to the point that it goes to or above the cost. There's obviously some exceptions. I mean, there have been some people that have like remodeled a basement, for example, or even built out a basement, and they did the work themselves. And they had friends that had supplies and all that. So their cost was significantly lower than what it would traditionally cost somebody. So, you know, you finish a nice basement, it would cost somebody $50,000 if they hired a contractor to do it, but the homeowner did it themselves, they did all the labor, so they didn't have that as a cost, they had extra supplies, and it cost them $10,000 to put it in.
Right.
On their own. They're probably going to get their money, almost certainly, without question. But you know, traditionally speaking, every improvement that you get done, it's never going to add up to what it costs. So the $10,000 kitchen remodel you mentioned, you know, you might get $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 out of it, but it's very unlikely that you'll get 10. That's not to say that you won't. Again, there's always the exception to the rule. If you have a home that was built in the 50s or 60s and still has the same kitchen from the 50s or 60s
Right.
with the avocado green appliances and the harvest gold, everything, it looks hideous. You tear that out and remodel it for $10,000, $15,000, you're probably going to get your money back out of it because it was way overdue.
Right.
But if you have a home that's 10 years old that still has a very good functional kitchen, nothing wrong with that, and, the laminate countertops, the cheaper cabinets and things like that, and you go and you put in custom cabinets and granite and all that, you spend some money, you're probably not going to get your money back out of it. I mean, a little bit, but again, not anywhere near what you put into it.
Yeah, I mean, I spend a lot of time, just because like we talked, I have construction background, I spend a lot of time telling people, if you want it, do it, because you're going to enjoy it. Don't do it just to sell it. Like, there's very few times that doing it to sell it is economically a smart decision, unless you're going to enjoy it. Now, like, if you're going to live there for 2 or 3 years and enjoy the shit out of those new floors that you put in, then do it. Like, it's worth it.
Yeah. Well, and to that, I mean, you hit on a point that this example illustrates everything that we talk about as far as improvements that you make to a home. Think about a pool. And a pool, I mean, being a real estate agent, and everybody it's not a running joke, but everybody knows for the most part that you will never get the money back out of a pool. It's like the worst thing that you can do to a house is add a pool.
That is hilarious how you said that, because we just put a pool in like 2 years ago.
We did too.
And it was done, like, that's what my wife wanted to know. Do you think that we'll get our money out of it? No, I don't. But do I think we have 4 kids and I don't want them in the house all day? Yeah, I do. Like, I want them out there playing. They're going to enjoy it. So that money's well spent, in my opinion.
And that's exactly right. I mean, having friends over, having family over, the experiences and all that's worth $1 million to me.
Right.
So I'll put in the money for the pool, not because I'm going to get the money back out of it, but because I'm going to enjoy it. And so, to that end, almost everything you do to a home kind of follows that same principle. Some things will add more than a pool would. Obviously, the pool is probably the extreme example on that side. But a kitchen, bathroom, you might get 60, 70, 80% of your dollar back out of it. So it's not a horrible investment on an average number, or an average basis.
How long do appraisals take?
So the inspection part of it, usually goes pretty quickly. I'd say around an hour, give or take 15, 20 minutes, something like that. And then most of what we do is back at the office. So I don't do this anymore, but if I were to sit down and just write a report from start to finish, it probably takes me, I'd say 5 to 6 hours to some degree. I mean, again, depends on complexity of property. Sometimes it might take me, 8, 10, 12 hours in some cases to write a report. But in essence, my process is split up a little bit because I have an assistant that helps me with some part of the process. So she does her thing, and I do my thing, and then another person does their thing. So it might take 2 to 3 days to get a report completely finished, but start to finish, I'd say probably 5 to 6 hours on average.
Okay. I guess how should an agent teach their seller to act during that appraisal? Do I need to get out of your way? Do I need to walk around with you? I mean, what's the best situation that you've seen?
I have a heavy opinion on this, and not everybody agrees with me, and that's fine. And part of it is just the way that I work, and most appraisers are kind of like me in that way. For that, we're OCD type A, we're math nerds. So I mean, think of all those things that would be the stereotype, and that to some degree, and so. To answer the question is that the seller can absolutely be there. It's their home. There's no reason that they can't be there, but I find them to be a distraction. So examples of this are people. I don't want people to follow me around. It distracts from me. I have a process. I have a way of going through a home, and in doing that, I make sure that I check everything off, that I look for things. A great example where I've had that situation come up before is, again, a process that I go through. I go into a room, a bedroom, let's say, and I turn on the light. And I turn on that light, and I walk through the room and look through it all, and I leave that light on. And that is an indicator to me that I need to take a picture of that room. If the light is on, I know it needs a picture. I turn the light off, that means that I don't need a picture anymore. That's just one of the ways that I walk through a home. And I've had homeowners that have walked right behind me, and I leave the light switch on, and they're mad. They flip it off. It's like, no, I'm not that person. I will turn your light off. I'm not being rude here. Just that was a way to do that. And I've had some people that will walk around and ask me questions, and what are you looking at, and all that. And I'm friendly, I'm personable, I want to talk to somebody, and certainly at the end, if you're there and you want to stick around, I'll talk to you about things. I'll answer questions as much as I can, but generally speaking, I'd say that if the seller was going to be there, they need to leave the appraiser alone. Let them do what they need to do. And if we need you, we'll come get you, because there might be a situation that I'm looking for the crawl space access. Can you help me here? And it's right here under the box, or stuff like that. And if I have questions at the end, I'll ask you. So that's the general idea, but the other side of it too, and this is outside of the appraisal side of it, more on the real estate agent side, and that from that perspective, I don't want the seller there, because that seller can tell the appraiser things, or just even haphazardly tell the appraiser something that maybe we didn't want the appraiser to know. And I'm not suggesting lying to the appraiser. I'm not suggesting hiding things from the appraiser, but it's kind of a plausible deniability in a way. That a great example of this that happened to me the other day is I'm walking through the house and doing my appraisal inspection, and it was for FHA, and FHA requires that we test to make sure that the water's running. So I'll turn on a faucet and I'll flush a toilet, stuff like that. This homeowner was there, and they stayed out of my way. They were very nice people, very pleasant people. Did my analysis, or did my inspection, and the guy said, I heard you turning on faucets and all that. And I said, yeah, that's part of the FHA thing. He said, well, I just wanted to let you know that the water heater's actually bad and we're having it replaced. And at that point, yeah, I had to say on my report that the water heater was bad and had to be replaced. It's just something I have to say. If I'm aware of it, I did that. There wasn't anything that I found. Nothing that I did. I turned on the water and it worked just fine. Again, I'm not inspecting the water heater. I'm not digging into it. I'm not finding out if it works. Just turn on the faucet. It worked. I'm fine. Right. But this homeowner happened to be there. And again, they were being honest, and I appreciate that. I don't discredit them. But it caused a problem for this particular property.
Right.
I mean, a minor problem, but still a problem nonetheless. So it's just, if I were an agent, I'd say don't be there. But if you want to be, that's fine. Just stay out of their way and don't open up your mouth. Offer them a bottle of water. Be cordial. Be friendly. All that kind of stuff. But I mean, don't reveal stuff that. Unless the appraiser asks. I mean, if the appraiser asks, again, I'm not suggesting somebody lie or hide something or manipulate, but still, I would not have, there would have been no way I would have known about that water heater unless they had said something.
Right, less is more.
Yep, absolutely.
Cool.